have a team that was supposed to do this stuff, but it was just easier for me to get it done.
So true.
Um, and I had a person I had promoted to a sales manager, and I kept doing my same old thing, right? And she kind of came into my office one day and she's like, "Why did you promote me?" And I said, "Oh, because you're doing a great job. You lead the team. You have all this initiative." Like, she goes, "Then why are you doing my job?" Yep, point taken. So whether you know how to do it or not is not the point. The point is you have a team. You have to trust your team. You put them in the position to be successful or not.
Sure.
And again, if you're not failing, you're not learning. And I learned that my role isn't to know how to do everyone's job. It's to support them.
Hello, and welcome to the Elevator Careers podcast, brought to you by the Allred Group. I'm your host, Matt Allred. When talent is mission critical, call the Allred Group. With industry expertise, top talent, and exceptional customer service, you need the Allred Group on your side. Your priority is our priority. Call now, 404-890-0445. In this episode, I interviewed Jeff Pugh about his journey from being an elevator apprentice to becoming a vice president. We dove into his mindset transition from a worker to a leader, some of the tough decisions involved in maintaining a positive work culture, stepping out of one's comfort zone for personal and team growth, and Jeff's experience with turning around struggling branches. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. I'm excited. I enjoyed our other conversations. I'm looking forward to getting to know you a little bit better and obviously sharing some of your story with our listeners. And so you've made a journey from apprentice to VP. What was it that made the elevator trade stick for you?
For me, originally, it was the pay. It was a good job. It was good pay for not really knowing a lot about elevators. But as I grew into the position, or as I grew into the industry, it's really the niche of the industry. There's only so many people that can actually do this. I love the opportunity that, within a few short years, you were at your full pay potential as a
Right.
mechanic. And the technical stuff really intrigued me. There's so many technological advances with these things. And, people really don't understand how these things work. They push a button, they get in, it takes them where they want to go. But the mechanics behind it are extremely detailed and very interesting to me. So yeah, there was lots of places to go. I could move up, and that's what really got me, was that.
Yeah. How long before that kind of clicked inside you when you're like, oh yeah, this is it. I'm staying here.
I would say it was probably in my second year as an apprentice. The first year I'd missed the cutoff for the schooling, so it was just on the job training, which is fantastic. But then as I got into school, and it's a short year really, from September to kind of May, and it's 1 day per week.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's what I was like, this is really neat. I get to work, I get to learn. I don't lose any time off work like they do with electricians and plumbers that have to go to school. And then I got that much more interested in the trade itself as I was building these elevators.
Right. Right. When you mentioned a minute ago, just kind of the niche nature of the trade and how it grabbed you, and obviously kind of applying the schooling along with the on the job. What was it about that apprenticeship model, or maybe the field time, that really shaped your growth the most?
Well, I think for me, I was very fortunate, and I got to work with some really, really good mechanics. They not only mentored me on the technical side, but they really pushed me, to do better, to be a good union guy, but also to be a good company guy.
Mhm.
It was that really shaped me, and I really wanted to perform. I wanted to perform for them. I wanted to perform for the company. Um, you know, there's a thing that elevator guys have, or maybe a lot of people have, but when you're driving through a city and you see all these skyscrapers and towers, you're like, oh, I built that one, or I, fixed that one, or whatever. So it was a pride thing for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm aware of that. I'm having done a little bit of roofing in my college days. Drive
Mhm.
past a house or a building, and hey,
Yeah, for
I
sure.
did those shingles, whatever the case
Yeah,
may be.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's pretty neat.
yeah, yeah. You mentioned that they kind of pushed you to become better. What specifically did that look like? Because I know that can go a lot of different ways,
Mhm.
right? Depending on who it is and how they perform, but what did you find most impactful for
Well, I
you?
think I think they gave me the opportunity. So as you're going through constructing an elevator, there's obviously a whole bunch of different things that go into it. But they gave me the opportunity where, we would do one component together and the next one I would do kind of on my own. You know what I
Cool.
mean? So they
Cool.
really
Yeah.
challenged me to learn the trade, learn how things go. Of course they were there to support me and it was always safe. There was nothing ever
Sure.
unsafe. But it was more just, hey, okay, you've seen it once now or seen it twice. Let's see what you can do. So I think that was probably the biggest part of it.
That's awesome. Well, and obviously they're believing in you, right? Showing you that hey, I've demonstrated I believe you can do this, and here's your
Yeah,
chance to show me and holler if you get stuck, right? I
100%.
mean, yeah,
Yeah,
very
it's one
cool.
of those things, and I tell this to all the young guys that come in the trade is, just keep an open mind, ask questions, be willing to learn. I coach my son's hockey, and it's all about effort and attitude. You show up with the right effort, and you put in the right attitude, and you put in the effort, you're going to be just fine.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So you talked about some of your mentors, certainly as an apprentice. What other I don't know mentor influences did you have as you continued to move up through the organizations?
Well, again, I had so many different positive influences in my life. I mean, you got to start from home. I had a really good upbringing. Both my parents worked very very hard. They instilled the work ethic. They instilled the confidence to not be afraid to fail. I think that was really where I learned all that. And I wanted what they had. I wanted the nice house and
Cool.
and stuff like that. And I knew they had sacrifices. They worked long hours and then when I got the opportunity to work with some of these great mechanics, that were very well respected in the industry, I just took it and ran with it. Whether it was one of the old adjusters working on the 1960s, relay logic stuff, or the adjuster that was working on the brand new technology. I just
Right.
took it all in and tried to learn as much as I could.
Kind of hungry for, just teach me, right? I mean, I'm sure that's paid off many times over, just your desire to learn.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's what it is just I wanted more. I always wanted more. And of course I failed. There were times where I was, blowing up circuit boards because I, you know, made a mistake. And,
Sure.
it's like anything, we get a new one, you put it back in and you don't make the same mistake, right?
Yep. Yep. You gotta, I mean, if you're anything like me, right, I learned by doing the wrong thing. I learned to
Yeah.
tie my shoes by tripping and landing on my face a few times. It's like, oh,
I mean, if you're not feeling, you're not learning, right? And,
yeah.
I think the bigger picture is not being afraid to fail. There's
Yeah.
there are so many instances where people are like, I don't want to make a mistake. Well, you're not gonna grow as fast
You
as
can't
you could,
learn. Yeah.
so it's okay to take a chance.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, making a mistake is part of the learning process. You can't learn otherwise. So one thing about, growing, moving up, is a lot of people really seem to struggle with moving from doing the work to leading people to do the work. And what would you say was maybe the hardest part of that transition for you?
I think for me, to be a leader, to be an effective leader, it's really about connecting. I think what I bring to the table is a little bit different. I don't have an MBA education.
Right.
I've got, a college background, business management type thing. But I think for me, I take those experiences that I learned from. I had some really good experiences and I apply them to what I do every day. I listen, I try and connect with the team, with the individual of the team. Um, and for me, it's about being consistent.
Right.
I have a saying here, um, we don't accept mediocrity. If you want to be the best, you can't accept mediocrity. And so I try and instill that good behavior into my teams, into the leaders of the branches and to their leaders of the field. Coming from the field, it gives me a different perspective, than coming up on the sales side of things. So it's a different connection with the field. We can actually talk the
Right.
language. So I think that helps as well.
Yeah. Did you find it challenging to move into a leadership role, or was it more just kind of a smooth, hey, we're just going to connect and I'm going to expect you to, to perform? I mean, sometimes it can be a little awkward because maybe one week you're peers and the next week you're the foreman or you're the superintendent and it's like, oh,
Yeah, I think you know Again, it's all for me, it was all in the experience and all in managing people. That was the hardest thing to learn. It wasn't necessarily the job. Going from, the field to the supervisor, I knew what those guys were doing. I knew the day-to-day stuff.
Sure.
So it was easy to relate to those guys. Where it was challenging was, like you said, going from, "Hey, we're having lunch today," to, "Now I'm your boss." That was a little
Yeah.
challenging, and I would never make them do anything that I wouldn't do. I'd expect them to have their lunch and their coffee and whatever else. Um, but I think it was about being relatable to them and say, "Hey, listen, guys, we got a job to do. How we do it in every building is a little bit different." I trusted them. I trust to do the right
Sure.
thing, and support them. Really, that's the biggest thing, is just support them. And going from the supervisor to the vice president was. I think I'm answering a different question here, but that was, supervisor to district manager was the hardest transition. I I worked crazy hours to try and figure this thing out. I went from managing, 8 or 9 mechanics that I understood their job, to managing, 20 people in the office, sales side, operations side, trying to understand what a district manager is supposed to do from the
Kind of
numbers.
different skill set, right? I mean, you're going from kind of being, able to touch the work to no, you got to be two steps away from it just to see what's going on in your office.
Absolutely. And, when as supervisor, I could jump on a job site with a guy and just get my hands dirty, let's do this. When you're a district manager, it's trying to appease so many different people, so many different jobs, so many different things. You have the union you have to deal with, you have the operations, the sales, you have, my bosses, and so on and so forth. So in some cases, it got to a point where it was just easier for me to do the work. Um, for example, like, if we're doing a sales meeting or whatever, I would go ahead and do all the updates and all that stuff. I have a team that was supposed to do this stuff, but it was just easier for me to get it done.
So true.
And I had a person I had promoted, to a sales manager, and I kept doing my same old thing, right? And she kind of came into my office one day, and she's like, "Why did you promote me?" And I said, "Oh, because you're doing a great job. You lead the team. You have all this initiative. Like, I appreciate the support, blah blah." She goes, "Then why are you doing my job?" I'm like, "Yep, point taken." So it went from a mindset change to, "Hey, whether you know how to do it or not is not the point. The point is, you have a team. You have to trust your team. You put them in the position to be successful or not."
Sure.
And again, back to the same concept. If you're not failing, you're not learning. And I learned that my role isn't to know how to do everyone's job. It's to support them. And I always say that you don't always have to have the answer,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
you have to be able to get it for them. You know what I mean? So I think that was the best explanation from going from a hands-on to a support function, because that's what it is. It's really like a do it to a support. And then going from, that transition from district manager to vice president was a relatively easy one, very similar to the mechanic to supervisor,
Okay.
right? So
Yeah.
now supporting branch managers, and, hey, I did this for 8 years. I know exactly when they say, "Hey, I'm having this challenge." Yes, I know exactly the challenge you're having. And then the experience comes in where, "Hey, this is what I did in the past. It worked really well." Or we create new processes or whatever the case is.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you talked about, having to make mistakes, that's
Yep,
where experience comes from, right? So when they
absolutely.
say, "Hey, share some ideas," or "Hey, I need some help," it's like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, I tripped
Yep.
over this one too, right? And here's what eventually worked, and now I have something to
Absolutely.
share."
Absolutely. But again, it's you know, at the same time, you want them to kinda go it on their own a little bit too. You want them to come
Yeah,
in with a solution. You don't just wanna say, "Oh, yeah, this is the answer." You know
right.
what I mean? No different than when you're sitting next to your son doing math, and it's like, "I know the answer, but you're gonna struggle. You're gonna get it. I'm just not gonna give you the answer." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unless, of course, it has to do with some sort of security or safety and whatnot, and then, it's all case by case, but typically it's, "Hey, how are we gonna get through this together?"
Yeah, I mean, as long as it's not, like you say, not dangerous and they're not in
Yeah.
peril,
Yeah.
then the struggle is valuable.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, stepping back, biting your tongue,
100%.
that can be, I imagine, right, the hardest thing. And I know even, just in my small company, right, sometimes have to just wait and see
Yeah,
what they come up with. And sometimes it's so creative. It's like, oh, I'm glad I didn't say anything because that's better than my idea.
100%. I think that's exactly what it is. It gives them confidence, right? You're
Right.
trying to build confidence on them, and um, if they come to you with a problem, it's right away. It's a conversation.
Right.
What do you think? How do you think the best way to handle this? I already have my ideas, but like you said, you're taking away their creativity and their thought process, right?
Yep. Yep. That's great. Well, so in a previous conversation, you had shared what I thought was a powerful analogy, just that toxic employees are like a cancer. Either it spreads or you cut it out. And
Yeah,
to me, that's got to be one of the hardest things of just becoming a leader.
yeah.
And so I'm curious, how do you assess when it's time to make those difficult decisions?
Um, yeah. I mean, you want to talk about failing? I've done this a couple of times. And my nature typically is I'm very forgiving, and I wholeheartedly believe in second chances.
Sure.
I always, for me, it's if there's a if there's a big decision to be made, and it could be whether regarding an employee, it could be a business decision or whatever the case is. There's the hamster wheel is going 100 miles an hour, and if I can't lay my head at night and that thing shut off, then I know it's not the right answer or right solution. Um, so for me, when it comes to toxic or cancerous people, I have let it go too long in a couple of cases, and what it does really is it just brings down the whole branch. It brings down
Right.
the whole business because, whether you want to, bury your head in the sand, it's happening and everyone sees it's happening. And as a leader, if you don't do anything, then you're condoning it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. You're
So
responsible for it, essentially.
you're accepting that behavior. So you have these guys, these people that are just killing themselves for you, and then you have this other that aren't. So really what happens is you can catch it pretty quickly. I can catch it pretty quickly now, but back in the day, it's like, "Oh my god, I'm gonna have to do their job, or I'm gonna have to do this, or someone else is gonna have to." And the ironic thing is when I acted on it, when I was able to sleep at night, um, all of a sudden it was like spring. All the flowers are coming back. The snow was melting. The dynamic of the branch and the business was fantastic. And all of a sudden, there's hands out. Hey, I got this, or oh, hey, I'll do this. And it created a completely different environment where everyone was there to support. And it was, like I said, it was just like a huge weight lifted off everyone's shoulders. And that's happened a couple of times. And when I came out here, it was pretty easy to see that there was same thing. So it didn't take long to act and rebuild the team. You
Yeah.
know,
How,
so
how do you go about having some of those conversations? I mean, let's say you walk into a new region and it's like, especially having been through it a couple times, right? It's like, okay, I can see that, maybe there's an issue around so and so. How do you kind of wade into that to kind of start to assess?
yeah, I mean, I think the important thing is to have conversations
Hmm.
because there's two sides to every story, and
Always.
we're so quick to jump on one side or another without actually getting all the details. So, I try and assess everything on my own. I sit down the one on ones. Hey, what's going really well? What's not going well? At this point in my career, it's not hard to look at the numbers and get a pretty quick assessment.
Sure.
Whether it's compliance, whether it's bottom line dollars, sales, or whatever the case is, and you kind of target a couple of things, ask some questions, and then make your assessment from there. I always believe, like I said, you set the clear expectations. Here are the expectations. You get the buy-in. Do you agree or disagree? Or hey, what do you think? And then you go from there. And if the expectations aren't met, then you have to move on.
Yeah. You said that you kind of held on too long a time or two. My question is, what is too long? Is it more of a feeling of how it's affecting the office, or is it 2 months? Or I'm just curious what you kind of
So, you know what? There's two things. One, it's the attitude of your people. You can tell. You can just walk around. You can tell people are just mopey or whatever. The telltales for me, sick days. You see people taking more and more sick days, which is a big one. You look at where's the performance? Is there performance issues? But yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is just the temperature of the branch or the business to
sure.
really identify this.
So I guess to answer my own question a little bit, if the temperature is dropping rapidly, the amount of time may be irrelevant, right? Maybe you need to act quicker because it's
Absolutely.
so toxic. Okay.
Absolutely. And one more thing I failed to mention is the attrition rates. If people are
Sure.
leaving, people typically don't leave jobs. They leave bosses, they leave environments.
Right.
And again, if you have a stagnant boss or leader that doesn't, I say boss, not a leader, because I think those two titles are completely different.
Mhm.
And I think if they're not seeing change and they see the boss accepting the behavior, that's a telltale sign as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thanks for digging into that a little bit more because, yeah, that's insightful. So, kind of back to, I guess, on a bigger scale, you lead a region that covers a massive geography,
Yeah.
400 people.
Yeah.
What does culture look like at that scale?
Yeah. So it's about consistency, right? And what I do here in Calgary is what they do in Edmonton, is what they do in Saskatchewan, Winnipeg. It starts from the top down, right?
Mhm.
And when I go visit the branches, the first thing we always talk about isn't about the profitability or the big sales. It's about, hey, everyone got home, everyone's getting home. That's all that matters. And you build a culture around safety and compliance. The rest will follow. So when you're leading, 300, 400 people, it's making sure that the leaders of those areas are towing the line, right? And making sure that we're all in agreement with how we're going. But that's the biggest thing. And to be relevant, I have a thing I call it follow up Fridays, and I will call one or two people that I haven't talked to in a while. So it could be a mechanic in Saskatchewan, which I did last week, or it could be a sales guy in Winnipeg, and it's just a phone call. It's not an email. It's not a text. It's a,
Nice. Yeah.
hey, checking in. What's going on? And I think that helps with, hey, you know what? We all care for each other. Everyone's listening. Wow, he took the time to pick up the call and give me a call. And it helps me also get the temperature of the branch. What's going well? What's not going well? And I get it from the mechanic's point of view, and I also get it from the office point of view. So I,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest thing. I try and get out there myself to see everyone. Grab coffee with someone. It's really just staying relevant, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, and you talked about, when you go visit, you're not just hammering the financials. Obviously, the financials speak for themselves, right? You get the reports, you get the spreadsheets, you have access to their
Yeah,
system. You already know those answers, and yet
yeah.
I have been in companies in the past where, let's go hammer those results. How do you think that would affect your people differently if 2 hours into your first meeting, that's all you say, and then it's like, oh, by the way, how are you doing?
Well, it sets the tone. It sets the tone
For
of, and
sure.
and it's clearly demonstrates the priorities.
Yeah.
If your priorities are numbers, well, then it's numbers, and I promise you they're not gonna be as good as they could as if the priority was the people.
Yeah.
It's at the end of the day, the numbers are the numbers, but you need people to execute, you need people to do the work, and if they're engaged and content, then the numbers will come.
Yeah. 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 It's amazing to me how much better the numbers are when the people are happy, right? When the
So,
team is cohesive, it's amazing. Yeah.
yeah.
That some people don't see it that way, and they think they
No,
need to.
absolutely not, and again, it's one of those things where, pick up the phone.
Yeah.
Pick up the phone. If someone calls you, pick up the phone. I take great pride in that. My phone's always on, whether good or bad. On vacation, they call. Hey, I need to talk to you about something. Sure, because you
Yeah.
can't let that stuff fester, right? And you want to be approachable and available.
Yeah. I think that's huge. And you also mentioned in the past, one of the leadership principles is that comfort equals stagnation.
Yeah.
How do you intentionally stretch yourself and really help your team, push your team or invite your team to do the same?
Well, it's kind of what we talked about before, right? It's enabling them to make decisions. It's by doing things that make you uncomfortable. Having those tough conversations, whether it be with a customer, whether it be with a fellow employee, mechanic, whatever the case is. You got to get out of that comfort zone, and you have to take a little more risk and do things that you wouldn't normally do. And everyone knows that if you come to me with a problem, you better have a solution or a couple solutions. There are cases where it's like, I have no idea what to do here. But in most cases, it's you get them thinking, and I don't need an answer today. Go back home, think about it, whatever. But I think that's the biggest thing is just pushing people out of their comfort zone. Like, I understand you're a salesperson, but hey, why don't you go do a site visit? with an
Sure.
operations guy or vice versa. I think that's the biggest thing is just push them outside of their comfort zone.
Yeah. Well, what strikes me there is that, comfort zones exist because of fear, right? It's like, oh, hey, I'm safe here. I'm not safe over there. But what I've heard you say is you've made a safe place for people to get out of their comfort zone, and an expectation that not only you going to get out, but you're going to be okay, right? You're not, the world's not going to fall. You're not going to,
Absolutely.
you're not going to die. Let's challenge you to get beyond what you're comfortable with,
Yeah.
and you're going to learn something.
Yeah, it's like every experience, right? Be comfortable with being uncomfortable. You know what I
So
mean?
true. Yep.
When you have all these different experiences and you're like, wow, that's a good one. I'm really not too sure how to deal with that right now. You write it down, you think about it, whatever, and that's the biggest thing is just be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and I think that if you allow the comfort zone to constrain you, it only goes one direction. That's to continue to shrink versus pushing beyond it, continuing to push it beyond it. You're gonna grow it,
Absolutely,
right? You're gonna have a bigger comfort zone, bigger influence,
absolutely.
bigger ability to make a change. And it reminds me, when you and I had talked before, you talked about taking over Ottawa and later
Yeah,
Calgary, and how change happened fast. And so I'm
yeah.
talking about discomfort and comfort zones. What do you believe are the essential steps to turning around a struggling branch? And I'm sure a lot of it was outside your comfort zone.
Well, absolutely. Ottawa was different because born and raised, I knew a lot of the people really well. Obviously, the mechanics I knew very well. So it was a little bit different because there's a lot more personal ties. It was pushing myself as a district manager to form different relationships with everyone. As a leader, now not a friend. And that line, it was very difficult in Ottawa to get across. I mean, and it took me longer than it did, let's say, in Calgary. But that was the biggest thing was to understand. Hey, listen. Yes, we're still cordial. We're still, acquaintances or whatever you want to, the barbecues and all that stuff. That's got to stop, because it's got to be equal. You know what I mean? If they see a leader, a district manager going out for dinner with the same guys, it's a perception, right? And when I came to Calgary, I knew some of the people already because of different meetings and whatnot, and they knew who I was. I mean, I've been here 24 years, so I'm a fossil here now. But so when I came here, it was like I said, relatively easy to get in there, meet some people, coffees, what's good, what's not good. The numbers were not great at the time. We had a couple of jobs that were not going well, and then shortly thereafter, we had a good person leave, and it was pretty evident, pretty clear that there had to be some changes here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, if you start to see a good person step away, it sounds
Yeah,
like you were at least keyed into, okay, this something's got to change because we can't
yeah.
afford that.
There was dynamics here that just weren't great. Good people, really
Hmm.
good people, smart people that cared, but the dynamic was not good, and you know, it was okay. This has to stop. When I came here later in the years, and compliance was an issue, and at the time I was told, "Hey, listen, you don't understand the Western way. Everything's fine." Hey, okay, yeah, I've been here 5 minutes. Sure, no, no problem. I look forward to learning the Western way. And then I just said, next year we're not going to be in the same position because if we're not compliant next year, well, then this is a problem for me. We were not compliant again,
Oh,
and
yeah,
so I was like, and I, again, coached the whole way through, come up with a game plan, processes. So following year, made the change, made some moves, rebuilt the team. People here that were just dying to flourish, but they
sure.
were being held back and stagnant. I'll recite one of my favorite books there is Good to Great. I'm driving the bus and I put the right people in the right seats. Some had to go to the back of the bus, some moved to the front of the bus.
Someone had to get off the bus, probably.
And there was a couple that actually, yeah, they had to get off. It was their stop.
Yep, yep. Well, and it sounds like having the right people in the right seats
Yeah.
and the right people on the bus is really critical to everything we're talking about, from leadership to performance to making change. Because if you don't have that, you got
Yeah.
nothing, right? You're trying to swim upstream and losing ground.
100%.
Yeah,
You have no
yeah,
chance. You really have no chance. I mean, the business will run, but it was, people get hurt. That really bothered me. And, I again, I come from the field, I come from that background, and there's no reason for it. There's no excuses. I believe that while incidents are not 100% preventable, you cannot prevent every incident. They're accidents, they're called accidents for a reason, but I believe you can prevent an injury. If you take the right steps, do the right planning, making sure you're not in the line of fire, you will be fine. And we've proven this. We've proven this time and time again. And even some mechanics, they had to get off the bus too because they just chose to work unsafe. And I mean, when you choose to do that, I have a problem with it. And I always argued that people are like, "Oh, I don't have time to do this or I have time to do that." Like, you make the time. And I promise you, you plan your work and you work your plan. Not only will we be safer and more compliant, we're going to do better profit wise. And
Sure.
now we're one of the fastest growing, year over year regions. Profitability. We've been 2 years now, incident free, recordable
Awesome.
free,
Awesome.
and everyone's happy. And the company's moving in a direction at a very, very rapid pace, and the team is engaged, and we're getting there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It's almost like they couldn't see it, right? Just believing that it's kind
Yeah.
of a limiting belief, like, "Oh, I don't have time to be safe." Okay, but if you start by prioritizing that, you'll find out that, hey, not only do you have time, you have less downtime, you don't hurt anybody or yourself or, and then the time magically shows up.
It does. And again, I always use the analogy of people at home, right? You're going to mount a TV on the wall and bring the TV down. And, you don't read the instructions. You don't need to do that. You go upstairs and you grab a couple things. You're like, oh, I forgot this. Go back upstairs. Oh, I forgot that. Go back up. And,
It's like
now
guilty.
you're making like 5 or 6 trips.
Right.
When you unloaded the TV, had you looked at everything you needed, you would have grabbed everything you needed and it would have been one step.
Yeah.
As it relates to safety, it becomes a little bit more compounded because what if you forgot your harness
Mm,
and you're
yeah.
like, oh, I'm just going to hop on this car real quick. That's when accidents happen, right? We have and it's everyday life, truthfully, where we have this, we diminish the risks, right? And it's one of our big things here, where we've done this so many times that we
Sure.
don't even recognize the hazard.
Right.
And how I explain that is there's times where we have to get other trades on top of the elevator to check sensors at the top of the hoistway. Mechanic gets on there, we do our thing. You get the electrician on there, whoever, they're like, "Oh my god, you guys ride on these things?" And they're kinda, "Wow, this is crazy."
Right.
But for us, it's like eating a lunch, no problem.
Yeah, it's just walking a tightrope and, hey, we do it every day,
Do it every
but to
day.
your point, I mean, in a fraction of a second, that could all change, right? With one little
Absolutely.
misstep, one little,
Yeah,
like I say, forget the harness, whatever, and
absolutely.
it's unforgiving. Yeah. Well, Jeff, I got one more question for you, and I appreciate you being with me, and this has been a lot of fun. The final question, as you look back across your career, from handling tools, to overseeing hundreds of people, what's one lesson you hope that the next generation of leaders hears loud and clear?
I think for me, if I had one, I would say, don't be afraid to ask for help.
Hmm.
Don't be afraid to ask. I struggled with that a lot, as an early manager, where I was afraid to ask for help because I didn't want people to think that I didn't know what I was doing. When the reality that I just created more stress for myself and my family and everything else, right? Working 14, 16, 18-hour days just to try and get through when I could have asked someone, "Hey, what do you think about this?" Or, "Hey, do you know about this?" And it would have saved me so much time and anxiety and everything else. When I relate that back to my mechanic days where you're on a job site trying to fix something and you're like, well, someone else must have faced this, right? And you call someone and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's this." Well, I just saved myself 2 or 3 hours. I saved the company 2 or 3 hours. I don't have to bang my head against the controller. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I can move on. So I think that would be the biggest thing. You know, don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah. Let me ask you just a little bit more on that. So, as a leader, like you said, I'm afraid they won't, think that I know what I'm doing. Is it people on your team? Is it higher ups? What was the hardest group of people to ask?
When I first started as a district manager, I was really afraid about what people would think of me if I didn't have all the answers. I felt at the time that I needed to know everything right away, and I didn't. I really didn't. And truthfully, all it did was, I had created more problems for myself, stress wise, and everything else. But I took away the power from my people. my teammates. I mean, I know how I feel when, I have a executive call me and say, "Hey, Jeff, hey, how would you handle this situation, or how would you handle this problem?" You instantly get that feel of, "Oh my God, they need me. They want," and you feel inclusive, right? Well, that's what I took away from my team initially, and now it's the exact opposite. Now I really push people, like I said, out of their comfort zone, and, "Hey, what do you think? How do you handle this?" So that's really what it was. It was a total perception thing. It was not even ego. It was more just I didn't want them to think that I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
When in
Yeah.
reality, I really didn't know what I was doing when I first took it over.
Didn't want him seeing the truth, right? It's
It was so true.
oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much for being with me today and sharing your insights over your career. It's been a lot of fun.
Oh, I appreciate the time and the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to the Elevator Careers podcast, sponsored by the Allred Group, a leader in elevator industry recruiting. Please visit our YouTube channel at Elevator Careers or check us out online at elevatorcareers.net. Please like and subscribe, and until next time, stay safe.